A black belt instructor thought it would be funny to bully a maid until her 13-year-old daughter stepped in and froze the whole dojo with a single sentence. "Leave my mother alone." The words didn't come from Carol, the cleaning woman trembling under the harsh fluorescent lights. They came from a girl standing in the doorway, backpack still hanging off one shoulder, her voice steady as stone. Todd Vance, head instructor of the dojo, a man who prided himself on being untouchable, turned with a smug smile. "What did you say, little girl?" he sneered, taking a step forward. Abigail did not bat an eyelash. "You heard me, apologize." A hush fell over the room, students shifted anxiously. A child had just challenged a man who had never been challenged in his life, and what happened next was something no one inside Rising Phoenix Dojo would ever forget. Before we dive deeper, tell us where you are watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel, and make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss tomorrow's special upload. Now, let's go back to where everything really started. For 20 years, Abigail's family had kept a secret, a promise passed from grandfather to granddaughter. A promise never to reveal what she was capable of. A promise that would be broken tonight. The dojo smelled of polished wood and sweat. An atmosphere built of discipline and tradition. Framed photos of former champions stared down from the walls. Beneath them sat a gleaming lineup of trophies, each reflecting the bright fluorescence above. Normally, late evenings in the dojo were calming for Carol. At 48, she moved with an unassuming efficiency, like a shadow easily blending into the background. For 6 months, she had worked here, arriving when the last class finished its activities on the floor so she could clean the floor, mirrors, and locker rooms. But tonight, it ran late. Todd Vance, owner, head instructor, and self-proclaimed master of the dojo, was just finishing up an advanced class. Carol stayed out of the way, ducking into the locker rooms to begin her work. Through the doorway, she could hear Todd's booming voice echo across the mats. By the time she made it into the main hall with her bucket and mop, Todd was teaching a complicated series of kicks to his finest students, all of whom were in black belts. Every movement seemed deliberately crafted to showcase his power, his authority, his superiority. Carol kept herself along the edge of the training floor, silently mopping the hardwood. She was almost invisible, until fate intervened. Her mop caught the edge of a metal water bottle and knocked it over with a loud metallic clang. It rolled across the mat, all eyes in the dojo snapping toward her. Carol froze. "I am so sorry," she whispered, mortified. Todd turned slowly. His expression carried pure annoyance. "What did you say?" he asked sharply. I am sorry, sir. It was an accident," she repeated. Todd walked toward her, his steps deliberate, looming over her. His voice rose, so the entire class could hear. "This is a place of concentration. Distractions can be dangerous. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," she whispered. But Todd wasn't done. He liked an audience. He circled her like a predator. "I've watched you push that mop around every night. So quiet, so humble." Students tittered nervously. "What do we do here?" Todd demanded. Carol swallowed. "You teach martial arts, sir." He imitated her voice in a high-pitched mockery. "We teach strength, discipline, respect. We teach people to know their place." He gestured to his students. "Some people fight, others clean." Carol's throat tightened. "I bet you've never been in a real fight," Todd said loudly. She shook her head. "No, sir?" He smirked. "Of course not. Your hands are for scrubbing, not striking." Then he stepped back and pointed at the mat. "Let's give the class a demonstration." Carol blinked. "What? You and me," Todd said with a grin. "We'll show everyone what happens when someone without discipline steps into a world they don't understand." His students remained silent. Carol felt trapped. If she refused, she'd be humiliated. If she agreed, she'd be destroyed. "Please," she asked softly, "just let me complete my work." "What's wrong?" "Afraid," Todd taunted. And then, before Carol could speak again, a quiet voice sliced through the tension. "Leave my mother alone." Every head turned. A young girl stood in the doorway. Abigail. Her ponytail was loose, her sweatshirt wrinkled, her backpack still hanging from her shoulder. She must have seen everything. Her face was pale, but her eyes were fierce. Todd laughed cruelly. Well, little Red Riding Hood thinks she's a hero." He loomed over her, towering above. "What did you say, little girl?" "I said leave her alone," Abigail repeated, not batting an eye. "You have no right to treat her like that," Todd grinned. "I have every right. This is my dojo." Carol hastened to her daughter's side. "Abby, please, just let's go." "We're not going anywhere, Mom," Abigail said, voice steady. "Not till he apologizes." That word, apologize, was apparently the funniest thing Todd had ever heard. He threw his head back and roared with laughter. Todd's laughter was joined by several of his students, both nervous and genuinely amused. What should have been a place of discipline now felt like a schoolyard where the bully held court, and Carol and Abigail were the targets. Apologize? He snorted through his chuckles. To her. For what, trying to teach her a lesson about the real world? His expression changed, a new, uglier idea coalescing behind his eyes. The demonstration he had planned for Carol was entertaining. But this was better. You know what? His smile twisted into something predatory. You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that. But guts aren't enough. You need strength to back them up. He turned to his students. Change of plans, our demonstration is still happening, but we have a new volunteer. He pointed at Abigail. If the daughter wants to defend mommy so badly, she can fight in her place. A low ripple of shock went through the room. This wasn't a joke anymore. This was crossing a line so boldly that even his most loyal students shifted uncomfortably, the only one with the courage to speak. Ben stepped forward. Sensei, maybe this isn't a good idea. She's just a kid. Todd's glare sliced through him. Are you questioning my teaching methods, Ben? This is a lesson about consequences. She wants to play hero. She'll be treated like a warrior. Then he turned back to Abigail, his voice syrupy with mock kindness. So, little hero, you want an apology? Earn it. Step on the mat. Just land a single touch on me, and I will drop to my knees in front of this entire class and apologize to both of you. His smile hardened. But if you can't, he didn't need to finish the threat. Carol grasped her daughter's arm. Abby, don't listen to him. He's cruel. We're leaving. But Abigail didn't budge. Something in the set of her body altered. Still, calm, immovable, she looked at her mother, at the exhaustion and humiliation etched into her face, and something inside her clicked into place. A promise, a memory. Her grandfather's voice in their old backyard, the warm summer wind moving through the trees. Abby, these techniques are not for trophies, not for showing off. These are about protection. You use them only when there is no other choice, when someone you love needs defending. And tonight, there was no other choice. Abigail carefully removed her mother's trembling arm and gave her a small, steady smile. It is okay, Mom. I have to. She turned to Todd. You want to fight me? She said, voice clear. Fine. I accept. The dojo froze. A 13-year-old girl had just taken on a challenge from a third-degree black belt. Todd stared in utter disbelief, then grinned so wide it looked grotesque. Oh yes, he would enjoy this. Excellent, he boomed. Everybody circle up. Lessons about to begin. The class made a circle around the mat, silent and taut. Carol watched in a daze of dread as Abigail set her backpack on a bench and slipped off her sneakers, lining them up neatly. Then she stepped onto the white mat with a calmness no child should have possessed. She was small, fragile even. It seemed standing alone in the center of that bright circle of men. Yet her eyes were steady, unyielding. Across from her, Todd stretched dramatically, cracking his knuckles, rolling his neck, loving every second of the attention. The rules are simple, he said. I am going to teach you about respect. Your job is to try to survive. Abigail didn't say a word. She merely set her feet width apart, loosened her shoulders, and lifted her hands. Not into fists, but open, palmed, angled, and ready. It wasn't a stance any of the students recognized. But Ben felt a shiver crawl up his spine. He'd seen that stance before, not in a dojo, but in an old military combat manual. It was not flashy, not theatrical. It was designed for one purpose: neutralize a threat. Quickly, Todd just grinned, oblivious. What's that supposed to be, asking for a high five? Abigail just stared at him, analyzing, calculating, waiting, which, in turn, made him furious. He lunged, snapping a powerful front kick straight at her ribs. Fast, brutal, precise. For any normal child, it would have been devastating. But it never touched her. Abigail moved, little more than a pivot. Really, a slight turn of the hip. The kick sliced through empty air. Todd stumbled, startled by the sudden lack of impact. The dojo gasped. She had avoided the strike like a leaf bending in the wind. That's beginner's luck, snarled Todd, humiliated. He struck again, this time with punches sharp, fast jabs followed by a cross aimed straight for her head. She watched the punches come, She watched the tension in his shoulders before they left his body, and she simply moved out of their way. No wasted energy, no panic, just effortless precision. "You telegraph your punches with your shoulders," she said softly. Todd's face twisted. A child critiquing him? His authority? His ego? Humiliation brewed into rage. With a roar, he charged, wild and sloppy, desperate. No technique, no discipline, just brute strength driven by wounded pride. The haymaker punch that he threw was huge, dangerous even. If it landed, it could seriously hurt her. But Abigail didn't flinch. She stepped forward, into the arc of the punch. Her left hand parried his wrist, turning his momentum. At that same instant, her right hand struck forward. A quick, precise spear. Hand thrust aimed at a single point below his ribs, the solar plexus. The impact was soft, almost unimpressive. But the effect was catastrophic. Todd froze. His breath caught. His muscles tensed. His body became rigid. He stood there like a statue, his own nervous system shutting down. His legs buckled after a few agonizing seconds. He collapsed to his knees, gagging for air, fighting just to breathe. The dojo was quiet, terrifyingly quiet. A 13-year-old girl had brought a grown black belt to the ground with a single strike. Abigail looked about the room, her voice lancing the silence like a knife. "Does anyone else want a lesson?" Nobody moved before him. Todd Vance, the tyrant of the dojo, was on his knees, gasping like a wounded animal. And that's when Carol, shaking, overwhelmed, finally broke free of her paralysis and scrambled onto the mat. Carol's fear for her daughter morphed into something deeper, an unsettling realization of what Abigail had just done. She rushed forward, wrapping her arms around the trembling girl. Half of the embrace was protection. The other half was disbelief. "Abby, my God, what did you do?" Carol whispered, her voice scarcely holding together. For a long moment, Abigail said nothing. She just leaned against her mother's shoulder and trembled faintly. The adrenaline coursing through her veins during the confrontation was well on its way to dissipating, leaving only shock and an empty realization behind. She had failed to keep her promise. She had used the skills her grandfather had given her, skills meant only for dire moments, before a room full of witnesses. The room around them began to thaw from its stunned silence. Students shifted uncomfortably, struggling to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Their sensei, a seasoned black belt, had been dismantled by a girl who didn't stand 5 feet tall. It didn't fit. It didn't make sense. Brian, the student that Todd had always chided and belittled, looked shaken. He'd watched the strike land. He hadn't understood it, but he'd seen the effect, without meaning to. He took a step backward, almost as if distance from Abigail could protect him from the impossible. But Ben, quiet, observant Ben, did the opposite. He stepped forward. There was no fear in his eyes, only awe and understanding. "I've seen something like that before," he murmured, stopping a respectful distance away. "The stance, the movement, that was Krav Maga, wasn't it? Or something close to it. A military discipline." Abigail raised her head slightly. In Ben's eyes, she didn't see judgment, just honest curiosity. She nodded once. "My grandfather taught me," she said softly across the mat. Todd Vance finally dragged in a full, scorched breath. The agony in his solar plexus was nothing compared to the searing humiliation consuming him. His authority, his pride, his image, shattered. That was a cheap shot. He rasped, fury twisting his features. "A dirty trick, not martial arts." Ben turned to him, his voice even, distinct. "Actually, Sensei, that was the purest form of martial arts there is. The art of survival. You challenged her. She ended it. That is what it is for." Todd's face contorted with outrage. "She's a child. She attacked me." "You attacked her," Ben countered. "We all saw it." Around the dojo, students turned their heads in aversion. Their once blind loyalty had vanished. For the very first time, they weren't afraid of Todd. They were ashamed of him. Meanwhile, Abigail was drifting into a memory. Her grandfather, Michael Peterson. The world had known him as a quiet man, a retired postal worker with a kind smile and hands roughened from working in his garden. But years ago, he'd been something else entirely. Sergeant Michael Peterson, a member of an elite U.S. Army unit that didn't officially exist. He never glorified war. He never spoke of battles or medals. Instead, he passed down the only part of his training that he believed mattered, the responsibility that came with strength. She remembered the two of them in his backyard when she was 9, the scent of fresh-cut grass, the warm sun on her cheeks. He had been teaching her how to disarm an attacker holding a stick. "Fighting is not anger, Abby," he said softly, catching her wrist with effortless precision. "Anger makes you sloppy. Fighting is a quiet conversation with your opponent's body. You listen, you feel, you find the opening." Then he knelt to her height, placing a hand over her heart. "These techniques are dangerous. They were designed for soldiers. You must never use them for pride, for revenge, or to show off. Only when someone you love is in danger and there is no other choice. Promise me, Abigail." "I promise, Grandpa." Back in the present, a tear slid down Abigail's cheek. She had kept her promise, hadn't she? Todd hadn't threatened her physically, but he had threatened her mother's dignity, her mother's spirit, something sacred tonight. She decided that counted as danger. Seeing his control over the room slipping away, Todd fell back to his old weapon threats. "Get out," he snarled, pointing a shaking finger. "Both of you and Carol, you're fired. And you," he stabbed a finger at Abigail, "you come near this place again, and I'll call the police." "That was assault." Carol flinched violently, but Abigail stepped forward. "No," she said softly. Todd froze. "You won't call the police," she went on, "because then you'd have to explain why you were fighting a 13-year-old girl, why you taunted my mother, why you challenged me. You think they'll believe you?" Todd's face drained of color. She was right. He was cornered. "I said get out," he shouted, his voice cracking. Carol grabbed Abigail's arm at once. "Let's go, honey, please." Abigail didn't resist. She picked up her shoes and backpack, every motion deliberate and controlled as she passed the trophy case, a long line of shining symbols meant to represent achievement and honor. They suddenly seemed hollow, empty, like lies behind glass. With her moving past him, Ben stepped forward. "That was incredible," he said softly. "Your grandfather must have been a great man." Abigail paused. For the first time all night, she permitted a small, genuine smile. "He was," she whispered. "He was the best." Then, with her mother, she vanished into the night, leaving behind a silent dojo with shaking foundations. The students stayed there, uneasy. Their sensei, the man who had taught them strength, control, and courage, lay defeated at the hands of a child. And the worst of it wasn't the defeat itself, but the truth it showed. Todd Vance stood on the mat, alone, and stared at the faces around him. For the first time, he didn't see any admiration. What he saw there was pity, disgust, doubt. Known by one, his students gathered their things and left. Brian, then 2 others, then 3. Soon only Ben remained. Todd looked at him with a desperate attempt at authority. "What are you waiting for? Leave, like the rest." Ben shook his head slowly. "I'm not leaving because I don't respect you, Sensei," he said. "I'm leaving because I've just realized I never learned anything worth keeping here." Todd's jaw tightened. "You taught us how to fight," Ben continues. "Her grandfather taught her why to fight. And tonight, you finally learned the difference." He bowed, not to Todd, but toward the door where Abigail had exited, and left without saying another word. Todd Vance was left to himself, but for the sound of his own demise, the walk home was silent. Long shadows stretched across the sidewalks as Carol and Abigail moved beneath the streetlights. Carol held her daughter's hand tightly, as if letting go might make her disappear. Her mind replayed it all, the cruelty, the challenge, impossible movements, strike, collapse. It felt unreal. She had known her father served in the army. She had known he taught Abigail a little self-defense. But this was beyond anything she had imagined. The precision, the discipline, the force contained in such a small body. Who was her daughter? Who had her father truly been? When they were finally at their small apartment, Carol was moving automatically, putting the kettle on, pulling out mugs, desperately trying to ground herself in routine. Abigail retreated to her room. A few minutes later, Carol knocked soft. "Abby, can I come in?" A faint yes drifted through. She entered to find Abigail staring at a picture frame. Her and Grandpa Mike, watering can in hand, smiling in a sunlit backyard. Carol sat next to her and handed her the warm mug. "I broke my promise," Abigail whispered. "Grandpa made me promise to only use what he taught me as a last resort. He'd be disappointed." Carol wrapped her arms around her daughter. "Oh, honey, no, he wouldn't." "I hurt him," Abigail insisted. "I didn't have to. I was angry." Carol stroked her hair gently. "What he said to me. What he planned to do. That was serious harm. You didn't fight out of anger. You ended a bad situation, quickly, with control. That is exactly what your grandfather taught you. Not to be a sword, but a shield." Abigail melted into her mother's arms, silently weeping. They sat that way for a time, two souls shaken, but safe. Eventually Carol broke the silence. "He was a soldier, wasn't he? A real one?" Abigail nodded. "He was part of something special, secret. He said he left because he saw too many people use their strength for the wrong reasons. He taught me so I wouldn't." A long silence ensued. Abigail finally said, "Mom, Todd won't let this go. Men like him, when their pride breaks, they become dangerous in other ways." She looked into her daughter's eyes, those eyes carrying so much wisdom beyond her years. Fear rose inside her, but something else rose too. "Resolve, let him try," Carol said firmly. "We'll face it together." Abigail nodded. She was right. Todd Vance's humiliation didn't fade. Rather, it grew heavier and darker with each passing day. From the dojo, the story made its rounds within the local martial arts community, with an incredible speed nobody was prepared for. People dismissed it at first as a silly rumor. A black belt being taken down by a 13-year-old girl. Impossible. But his students had been there to see it, and in particular, Ben spoke honestly whenever people asked him what had happened. He didn't embellish it. He simply stated that Todd had bullied a cleaner, challenged her daughter, and been taken down by a single, precise strike. Todd tried to lie his way out of it. He said she had used a taser on him, that she sucker punched him, that the whole thing was staged. But his story kept changing, and everyone could see the desperation behind it. His students quit. His reputation collapsed. His dojo went bankrupt, and the building was foreclosed. His entire identity fell apart. But as Abigail had predicted, a man with nothing to lose can become dangerous. Todd's rage hardened into a focused hatred aimed directly at Carol and Abigail. He found out where Carol worked her part-time cleaning jobs and began harassing her. He called her employers and told lies about her. He showed up outside her workplaces, standing silently and glaring. He never spoke to her or touched her, but his presence alone made people uneasy. One by one, Carol lost her jobs. Soon, she had no income at all, and an eviction notice was coming. Carol was terrified, though she tried to hide it from Abigail. Abigail saw everything. The exhaustion in her mother's face, the fear in her eyes, the unpaid bills piling up. Abigail blamed herself. She had used her grandfather's teachings, and now the consequences had followed. But her grandfather's lessons weren't limited to combat. They were about strategy. Know your enemy. Gather information. Choose your ground. Never fight on your enemy's terms, her grandfather always said. If they want a fist fight, give them a chess match. Abigail needed to change the battlefield. Todd spread his fear through shadows and whispers. She would pull him into the light. She needed help, and there was only one person who had seen everything that night and had the courage to speak up. Ben. It took her 2 days to find him. She searched the dojo's social media page and found a picture from an old tournament with his full name. From there, she found him in his high school student directory. The next afternoon, she waited outside his school. When Ben walked out with his friends, she called his name. He recognized her immediately and asked if everything was okay. Abigail told him the truth about the harassment, the lost jobs, and the eviction threats. Ben listened quietly, growing angrier as she talked. He promised to help her. They devised a plan together. Carol had taken a temporary cleaning job in an office building downtown, and Abigail knew Todd would show up there eventually. Ben waited across the street from the building in a coffee shop, his phone at the ready. It didn't take long. Todd's old pickup truck pulled up and parked down the block. He never got out. He just sat there staring into the front building entrance. Ben filmed him. They repeated this process over a number of nights. filming hours of footage that clearly demonstrated Todd stalking Carol. But Abigail knew that just taking the footage to the police wasn't enough. She needed to destroy Todd's credibility completely. If he lost this, he couldn't harass them anymore. There was a popular community Facebook page for Oak City neighbors. It was moderated by a highly respected retired teacher, Mrs. Gable. It seemed like the ideal venue in which to expose Todd. Abigail composed a calm and factual post describing what Todd had done. She described the stalking, the lies, and the harassment. She said they had hours of video proof and tagged Todd directly. Ben wondered why they didn't upload the proof immediately. Abigail explained that they needed Todd to react first. They needed him to expose himself. They posted it on a Friday night. In a matter of minutes, Todd responded with an angry all-caps rant. He denied everything. He attacked Abigail and Carol. He said they were lying for money. He said no proof existed. He said he had never been near Carol's workplace. Soon, people started arguing in the comments. Some were defending Todd, while others recognized just how unhinged his reply sounded. Finally, the moderator, Mrs. Gable, commented, asking Todd directly if he was denying the existence of the video evidence. Still furious, Todd walked right into the trap. "It does not exist," he wrote. "They are lying. I was never at her workplace. Let them show their video, they can't." That was absolutely what Abigail needed. She turned to Ben and said, "Okay." Now, Ben uploaded the first of several videos, a 5-minute clip that unmistakably showed Todd's truck parked across from Carol's job, watching the building for over an hour. The first video was undeniable. It showed the street, the office building, and Todd's truck parked in the shadows for a long, uncomfortable stretch of time. Ben had even zoomed in to show Todd's face lit up by his phone screen. The timestamp was clearly visible. He posted it with a simple caption, "Video from Monday night. As you can see, Mr. Vance is lying. We have more." Everything changed in an instant. Those who had defended Todd earlier were now completely silent. Others who had been unsure suddenly saw the truth. Comments began to pour in. "He said he was never there. That is definitely him. He is stalking her. This is terrifying." The tone of the entire community flipped. Mrs. Gable commented again, and in the thread her voice was sharp. "Mr. Vance, you have been caught in a very serious lie. This behavior is unacceptable." Todd panicked. His next comments were frantic and incoherent. The video was fake, he insisted. It wasn't his truck. The footage was edited, but it was over. No one believed him anymore. Then Ben uploaded the video of the second night, and then the third. All were the same. Todd hanging around in his truck, peering at Carol's workplace from the darkness. Every new video was another blow to an already collapsing reputation. Todd had always used fear and ego as a means of controlling others, but under the bright light of public truth, he was exposed for what he was. Nothing more than a bully and a coward. The next morning, the doorbell rang. Carol and Abigail exchanged a nervous look. She opened the door to a police officer standing with Mrs. Gable. The officer spoke kindly. "Mrs. Peterson, we've received a number of reports regarding the harassment you have been subjected to. Mrs. Gable has shared with us the online discussion and videos. We do have enough evidence to issue a formal restraining order and to pursue charges of stalking." Mrs. Gable stepped forward holding a small notepad. "I've been on the phone all morning," she said. "I contacted your previous employers. Once they understood what happened, they were horrified. 2 of them want to rehire you immediately, and several other business owners have reached out to offer work. This community takes care of its own. We won't let a bully win." Tears welled up in Carol's eyes. But for the first time in weeks, they were tears of relief rather than fear. The rest unfolded in quick order, confronting community outrage, possible charges, and complete disgrace. Todd left town in a quiet manner. A truck was spotted with him in it going north on the interstate. Nobody in Oak City saw him again. Things slowly returned to normal for Carol and Abigail, but it was a new kind of normal. Carol got her best job back. Neighbors who barely knew them started waving hello. People dropped off groceries, offered small jobs, and made sure they felt supported. The heavy cloud of fear that had hung over them was gone, replaced by something warm and hopeful. It wasn't until weeks later, on a bright Saturday afternoon, that Abigail was in the small community garden behind their apartment. She knelt between her tomato plants, examining them, when she felt a presence behind her. It was Ben, holding a small gift awkwardly wrapped in paper. Got you something, he said, embarrassed. It's to say thank you for teaching me something important. Abigail opened it. Inside was a small leather journal and a nice pen. Ben shuffled his feet. I realized something, he said. What you did, that was the real martial art. Not kicking or punching, but strategy and discipline, using your mind instead of your fists. I quit the dojo. I am studying chess now. I figured I should write down what I am learning. Abigail smiled, a real warm smile. Grandpa Mike would have liked that, she said. He always told me the strongest muscle is the one between your ears. She looked down at the journal in her hands and felt something inside her shift. Her grandfather had taught her how to fight, yes, but more importantly, he had taught her how to be strong in a world full of different kinds of danger. He had given her tools, not just physical, but mental ones, and now she finally understood how to use them all. She had protected her mother, she had honored her promise, and she had learned perhaps the most important lesson of all. True strength isn't in the force of your strike, but in your ability to stand in the light with nothing but the truth. The secret her family had been carrying for 20 years was not disclosed as an act of violence, but as one of wisdom from a quiet old soldier. In the peaceful stillness of the garden, Abigail knew that he would have been proud. And that is where the story ends for now. I hope it gave you a chance to breathe, disconnect a little, and drift away from your everyday worries. I'd love to hear what you were doing as you listened along. Maybe unwinding after work, taking a walk, or getting ready for bed. Leave a comment. I do really read every single one. And if you enjoyed this kind of story, it really helps people find the channel if you like and subscribe too. Thanks for spending this time with me.